Hello and welcome back to Talk. This is Andre Walker and Asher Gould. We're joined by our guest co-host, who is Chloe Dobbs, and also by Phillip Ullmann, who is an entrepreneur who made built an enormous business, contracting in people in warehouses, contracting people in security, who is now, it's fair to say, unconvinced by the outsourcing revolution. Why? How did we get there? You know, I just wonder. I look at myself, and I remember back in the 1980s when I was a kid, we might buy a washing machine, and I think your average washing machine was guaranteed for 10 years before you even had to pay for it to be serviced. Nowadays, everybody just buys all this junk and throws it in the bin.
Absolutely right. Yeah, we used to have a dishwasher that absolutely
inbuilt obsolescence.
Yeah, they design it to break because they want to make more money from the repurchase. It was interesting. I do a lot of studying, and there's a book. I love my books, and there's a few books that have become very tattered because I use them so much. It would be a lot cheaper for me to bin them, but I've got a bookbinder who it costs me probably 3 or 4 times the cost of a new book to bind it, but I give him meaningful work. He enjoys doing it, and to throw away a book that's been printed just because the numbers don't work is crazy. So, but that's absolutely right. The numbers mean that we don't actually look after people.
Well, Apple are the worst sinners. But I remember I had Trigger, what my family called Trigger's laptop, in honour of Only Fools and Horses, and I bought this thing for about 450 quid, and I had it for 10 years. But I just kept replacing components as it went along. Now, it must have cost me, I think, probably £450 to buy it, maybe £50 a year to repair it. And they called it Trigger's laptop because it had 3 new keyboards, 2 new screens, 4 new...
That's how he invented the iPad. It was amazing how he did that.
However, Chloe, you know, this throwaway culture, this lack of meaningful work. I mean, you know, Asher asked about why the Germans do so well. You know, there is some degree of pride in engineering, pride in manufacturing, where in Germany they go, all right, you can buy this junk. That's
you're seen as a doctor, as an engineer. Here you look down like a bricklayer. You know, I mean, even a bricklayer used to be looked up as a master.
You're right. They think an engineer is somebody who is working on the shop floor, and not some. We need quality engineers.
And plumbers now earn 100 grand a year.
I think whatever you do, any job you do, any hobby you have, if you do a very good job of something, you will enjoy it much, much more, even if that requires far more work. So if you create a product which is genuinely brilliant and you can see it adds value to people's lives, you're going to get massive fulfillment from that job or running that business. When you just make this rubbish that breaks constantly and is just there to make money, I don't understand how people get fulfillment.
Can I just say to you what we were saying during the break, just before Phillip comes in? You were talking about street sweeping, and I'll just repeat what I said to you during the break. When I was in local government, I thought, you know, how can we make street sweepers better? Because they're downtrodden, you know, they don't feel great, people have a laugh at them. And I wanted to have each ward to have its own ward manager who was the street cleaner, who would remove your graffiti, who'd sweep the streets, and who used to regularly meet with the councillors in that ward. And then I wanted to put up a sign saying, Bob Jones is the ward manager of this ward, and give him some pride in his work. So he's got his brass plaque that he can polish.
And you put them on roller skates, didn't you, around with the bin line, and they became local celebrities.
So that's the thing. If you give people responsibility, as well as doing the job, if people have responsibility, they feel much more motivated, and they can see that their actions have a significant impact on the company or the streets. In that case, I don't know if you read the brilliant book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and so he talks about sort of the master of delegation in a business in that book. And he says so many companies, they won't delegate and give more responsibility to staff because they don't trust them, they don't think that they'll be able to do it.
They think they're idiots.
He says you will always be very pleasantly surprised by how well they do when you give them a task that you think, and just trial and error. Okay, what's the worst that happens? If you give them a task that you think they'll fail at, they fail once, you can then go back to your old system, but just experiment. And
but corporate Britain hates that, don't they?
They do. I mean, there's a guy called Phillip Ullmann that looked at 12 organisations. He was looking for the next way of organising our companies. A phenomenal book called Reinventing Organisations. And he drew to my attention a business called Bertshog, which illustrates the point that you make. This is in Holland. And what used to happen is district nurses were provided by large organisations, and what happens, as happens with all companies, eventually get bigger and bigger. They buy each other, and you end up with a system of automation. So you start saying, okay, we're going to have clocking in. Your nurse will go to a house, they'll clock in, they've got half an hour, there'll be a scheduling team, you'll have a specialist nurse that deals with bathing the patient, another one to take blood, and your workers, the nurses, become cogs in a machine. Yes. They hate every minute of it. And not only that, what happened with the patients is they had to, because initially they would have one nurse that cared for them, they ended up with 15 different nurses doing each task.
And they don't know the jobs of the people.
And they have to tell 15 times, they've got to start telling their story, and they hate it. They become things. And so what Joost de Blok did, he was a nurse with one of these organisations and said, 1 minute, we've got to change this, we've got to, and they wouldn't listen to him. So he started completely from scratch. This is about 2006. And he started with a team of 10 nurses, following the principles you're talking about, the local team, just providing for the needs of the local patient with one nurse, deals with all of the needs of a group of patients. And they start with, they sit down, they have a cup of coffee, and they spend time understanding the patient. And then they no centralised scheduling team, no centralised.
Well, it's like we used to have one GP when we were young.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
And that's how it worked. They knew you.
So what we need to do is distribute responsibilities. We can't have this centralised model, which might make more money for the shareholder, because they're effectively treating everybody like a cog in a machine. But people become cogs, and
we're not machines.
And we're not machines.
But
they
there's
don't
another
look at it from a psychological perspective.
But I know you personally, Philip. You've talked about being an engineer, you've talked about being an entrepreneur, but there is also the other bit of your career, which is being an accountant. We have too many accountants worrying too much about, get this extra minute out of this person and this £5 extra. And a lot of it, I mean, when you look at these warehouses, the jobs wouldn't be that bad if you weren't being timed, and then there's an average and everyone below average is in trouble, so it constantly drives up. In the end, you run 20 miles.
That's the point. You become a thing. You become, and anybody could do the job.
People giving birth in Sports Direct toilets and things like that happen.
Absolutely right.
Scared about going to the toilet.
That's it. We've seen the films. They're scared.
But this is all about AI and robots watching massive corporates.
Again, AI is spin. I think what we need to do is re-engage people. We need to start to get people to be treated like living human beings and be part of a local team, a local family working together. And it's doable. And actually, by the way, the Birdsong model was a lot cheaper, as it happens, than the model that was
on the issue of price, I personally think one of the big problems is we've exchanged happiness for consumerism. I really do believe that. And it's like, look, you haven't got any friends, you haven't got any family, but what you have got is the ability to order a brand new telly and have it delivered tomorrow.
That is pretty good, though.
Don't take Amazon.
Can we have consumer products for the price we've got now, delivered as swiftly as they are now, if we gave people a living wage, say, a decent accommodation and decent terms and conditions? Or do I have to sit there and say, abuse of these people, migrant people, is a price I have to pay for the lifestyle I want?
The answer is no. We have to go back to basics. Again, I can't explain standing on one leg. We have to look at money. We have to look at debt. We have to look at the way our organisations are run. But there definitely is a way of... I mean, if you think about it, over the last 50 to 100 years, Keynes predicted that we would be, I think, 8 times more efficient than we were, and therefore nobody would need to do any work. We've actually achieved that. We are 8 times more productive than when, I think he said this in 1923. But because of the way the monetary system works, we haven't actually got people sitting around. We effectively have discontent. We have people who are unemployed. We shouldn't. So the bottom line is, if we had a system that enabled the resources to be fairly distributed to ensure that people... There's no reason not to have abundance for. It is doable.
OK, well, look, Philip, I think we can read about some of your stuff in the Telegraph. Also, you've got a YouTube website, page, and indeed a website, The Manna Journey, MANNA.
Journey.
Phillip Ullmann, isn't it?
Phillip PHILLIPULLMANN.
We didn't need to do the full spelling of everything.
But that's it, you've got it.
I think it's fascinating. I'll tell you why I think it's fascinating, Philip, because we are so used to saying to ourselves that outsourcing is brilliant, that products being made in China is brilliant, and immigration is terrible, but the fact that now the reality is it's all linked together, and actually the damage we're doing to our society in some respects is self-inflicted.
What I say is we've got a political system which is not encouraging thinking out of the box. We've got everybody towing a line to find a distinction between Labour and Conservative. It was very, very hard. Whereas there is, they're fighting about a narrow space. There's actually an enormous opportunity to rethink and redesign society. No one's thinking about it.
There's no willpower to experiment anymore.
There's no.
Well, hopefully we'll get there in the end. So that was Phillip Ullmann. He's a social entrepreneur. I mean, unbelievable to be the biggest employer of migrant workers in the country and then recognise that it was a mistake. But anyway, we've talked a little bit about immigration. We're going to be talking about the BBC just in a couple of moments. We've got Josh Rom in from The Sun, and we're